Hello, my name's Aviva, and today I wanted to share with you some romance recommendations that have really good groveling moments in them. I love when the guy has to beg for the girl back. Usually at the end of a romance book, something happens between the couple that either pulls them apart, makes them get into a fight before the ending can happen, and then they come back together. And when the whole situation works itself out where the guy has got to basically beg for the woman back and she doesn't make it easy for him, I just love that. I think it's the best way to end a book because it just shows you how much the guy is in love with this girl and will do absolutely anything to get her back. So I'm going to share with you a handful of books that situation kind of happens in. And because usually the groveling moments does happen at the end of the book, this video might be slightly spoilery because I do want to talk about the groveling moments. So I warned you, I'm going to try to keep it very, minimal. I'm not going to say too much, but I do want to probably mention some stuff. Who knows what's going to come out of my mouth once we get started. So with that said, the first book I did want to share with you is actually a recent read of mine, which was Ignite by Melanie Harlow. So this is actually the sixth book in a companion series. I think it's called Cloverley Heights. And, they all have character overlapping, but you can really read them as a standalone. This was the first book that I read in this companion series, and I absolutely loved it. I didn't think I needed any backstory whatsoever. So in this book, you're following this guy who is a grump. He's a single dad, he's a firefighter, and he basically moves into this new home and meets his next door neighbor, who is this bubbly sunshine girl that is 12 years younger than him. And he ends up, just being really attracted to her, and he can't help but keep going over and saying hello and basically just, getting involved with her, and they're gonna have a romance. It's very adorable. It's very sweet. It kind of has that small town vibe going on to it, just where everything is really easy, nonchalant, it's a good time all around the board. Nothing too intense happens. It's just gonna put a smile on your face. And I absolutely loved this book. And at the end of it, the girl basically is gonna move away, and the guy doesn't tell her to stay. And therefore, at the end of the book, he basically has to realize that he can't live without her, and he's going to have to beg on his knees to get her back. And that is literally what he does. I'm not gonna, go too into it, but all I'm gonna say is that it was so freaking cute. It just made this book an easy 5 stars for me, ending the book with a good groveling moment. I mean, what more can you ask for? And then another book that was a recent read of mine that had an amazing groveling moment in it was Things We Never Got Over by Lucy Score. So this book is a small town romance, grumpy sunshine situation, a single mom, neighbors, they're working together. It's just all it's a very small town vibe sort of situation. And at the end of this book, there was this thing where the guy basically he didn't want to be in a relationship, and he was so attached to the girl. So he basically broke up with her. And then the second he did it, he realized that he made the biggest mistake of his life, and he had to work so freaking hard to make it up to her that it was amazing. In this book, the reasoning why they broke up wasn't my favorite thing that people do at the end of the books. I don't necessarily love when a character just breaks up with the person because they don't think that they deserve to be in a relationship sort of thing. It's not my favorite way to catalyst a book or whatever you want to call it, but the way that he made up for it definitely made it up to me. Next, I wanted to share The Finish Line by Kate Stewart, which is the third book in the Ravenhood series. So there's Flock, Exodus, and then The Finish Line. You do have to read it as a full series, and I'm not really going to get into what the story is about because, I mean, it's so hard to explain what this series is about, but I recommend reading it if you are down to give it a shot. It's very dark, very mysterious, very what is going on the whole time, and happens to be at the end of book 2, something happens, obviously. The couple gets pulled apart, and then literally in the last chapter of the second book, he basically begs for her back, and she's I'm not gonna make it that easy for you. You literally broke my heart. So then we literally got a full third book of him groveling and begging for her back, literally working on his hands and knees to do anything in the world so that she will take him back. And I mean, it was amazing. If you like groveling, this is literally a groveling book. From beginning to end, he just had to work so freaking hard so that she would forgive him. And I mean, it made this series perfect. Next, I wanted to share The Wall of Winnipeg by Mariana Zapata, which is a very, very slow burn romance. Mariana Zapata is very well known for her slow burn romances, and you have to go in it with the right mindset so that you're just there for the ride. You have to see it develop. Sometimes I feel people are oh, well, I could never get into the book because nothing was happening. And it's no, it was happening. You just have to slowly wait for it. You know what I mean? But in this book happens to be the groveling takes place at the beginning of the book, not at the end of the book. So this story is basically about a professional football player and his personal assistant. So this girl has been working for this guy for like 2 years or so, and he is horrible to work for. Like, he never says thank you. He doesn't appreciate her, anything along those lines. And after 2 years, she has kind of had enough. So she basically quits. And then a month later, he is knocking on her door, begging for her to come back. And oh my, does he have to grovel. She does not give in very easily. She hated working for him. So he must be groveling very, very hard for her to basically give into what he wants from her. And I'm just going to say that Mariana Zapata, she's a slow burn romance writer, and therefore nothing happens very quickly in her book. And therefore the groveling moment that happened didn't happen quickly. And it was just so freaking good. I also have Luna and the Lie by Mariana Zapata, which again is another slow burn romance, but in this story you are following two people who work at a mechanic shop. So there's this girl who is like, I think she's like 26 or so, and she works at the shop as like a painter. She like paints cars all the time. And then there is the co-owner of this shop, who I think he's like 43 or somewhere like that. It's a pretty big age gap, and he is a huge grump. So it's like a grumpy sunshine situation, and he is really hard to work for. Like, everybody's always like scared of him. He always is like, like biting at people's heads off, like, don't come near me, I'm in a bad mood all the time, sort of thing. And they're just basically gonna have a very slow burn romance. She, like a long time ago when he started working there, basically told a lie for him. And ever since then, he basically like feels like he owes her something. So the story kind of starts out where she basically like, cashes in on the favor that he keeps throwing at her face. Like, she's finally ready to ask him for something. And then obviously the story is gonna go from there. So happens to be at the end of this book, I don't even remember how many pages it was, but this had the best groveling moments I might have ever read. Like, I mean, it happens to be all of these books have amazing groveling moments in their own way, but in this book specifically, he had to grovel so freaking bad, and it was so cute. It, like, the groveling moment, I feel like turned him into like a full-on cinnamon roll. Like, the way that he just was like trying to make her day all the time, like trying to get her back, trying to get her to notice him again, was so freaking cute. I absolutely loved it. Next, I wanted to share The Fine Print by Lauren Asher, which is the first book in the Dreamland Billionaires companion series. So in this series, you're following like three brothers. They each get their own book, and their grandfather was the founder and owner of like basically Disney, Dreamland Amusement Park, which is like Disney Pixar sort of vibes. And when the grandfather died, he left in his will that for them to inherit their portion of the company, they have to like first fulfill this clause. So in book one, the guy's clause, his name is Rowan. He basically has to go to the Dreamland Amusement Park and work there for 6 months and try to find out what is wrong with this park that seems to be perfect. Like, on the outside, it's running the best that it's ever been running, but something's wrong with it, and he has to go and find out what it is. So he meets this girl Zara while he's there, who is one of the workers at this place, and she's basically going to help him figure out, how to fix the park. And they're obviously going to have their romance, and I don't really want to give it away because I feel like the thing is that there's two groveling moments in this book, and both of them were so freaking good. Like, first, this guy basically wants to get closer to her, so he basically kind of like tells a lie, and then once he basically fesses up to the lie that he told, he has to grovel so hard to get her back because she is really, really hurt by it. And then at the end of the book, he messes up again, and then he has to grovel again. And it was so good. I don't want to give it away because I feel like, not like people don't really know how this book plays out, but I want you to know that there's not one, but there are two really, really adorable groveling moments in this book. And if you're a fan of that sort of vibe, I highly recommend reading this one. Next, I wanted to share Not Pretending Anymore by V. Keeland and Penelope Ward. I feel like I have not talked about this book in a video in a while, but I loved this book. This was a fake dating roommate scenario. This girl, she needed a roommate, and happens to be this guy is like the only person that seems to be like a normal person that she's willing to live with, except he is a guy. But he's like, don't worry, because I happen to have a crush on this other girl, so I'm not going to be interested in you. And she's like, well, good, because I actually have a crush on this guy, and therefore I'm not interested in you, so let's not make this weird. So they end up becoming roommates. They end up becoming actually really good friends, and it's really adorable. And then they end up deciding to fake date each other to try and get their crushes jealous. And then obviously once that works and they got their crushes jealous, they realized that they actually had a better time hanging out with their fake date than the person that they were trying to use their fake date to get jealous, if that makes sense. So it's a very cute story along those lines, and happens to be at the end of this book. I mean, I read this a while ago, so to be very like honest with you, I don't fully remember what it was, but I do remember that at one point the girl kind of like left, and then the guy, he was like, oh my god, I miss her, I need to get her back, and it's like, if I don't do this now, I'm gonna regret it, sort of thing. And he basically like chases after her and tries to get her to like have a relationship with him somehow. And I don't remember the full-on details of how it works out, but I do remember, like, when I look at this book and I see this cover, I'm like, oh yeah, that had a good groveling moment in it. So just take my word for it, because it's like very blurry, but I know that it was there, and it was a good time. I also have a Not So Me Cute by Megan Quinn, which is another fake dating book between this billionaire and this girl that just lost her job. Like, this billionaire basically told a lie to like somebody he's trying to make a deal with, that he actually has like a fiance who is pregnant, and that yes, they'll go to dinner like, you know, that weekend or whatever, except he doesn't have any of that. So he has to find somebody to like pretend to be his fake fiance and also pretend to be pregnant. And then he literally runs into this girl on the street that happens to have just lost her job and is looking for a billionaire husband, because, you know, she doesn't know what to do with her life now, and she just needs somebody to help support her. It was kind of a joke for her, but at the same time, like, it literally ended up happening that way. And then she ends up saying yes to a fake fianceing him, or whatever you want to call it. And then they're obviously going to have that romance, and it's a very cute story. Like, it's very like laugh out loud funny. There were so many like hysterical moments in this book, and I really did enjoy the read. And happens to be at the end of the book, you do get a groveling moment where like the guy just like pushes the girl away, and then like, you know, he ends up realizing that no, I actually love her and I want to be with her. And then he literally has to like get on his hands and knees and like beg for her to like take him back. And like, he does one of those like really good speeches of like, you know, he says everything that like why he wants to be with her, everything along those lines. He does things like in the background to like make everybody in her life happier. And he was so cute about it that I think that it definitely deserves like a thumbs up on the groveling scale. Next, I wanted to share Vicious by LJ Shen, which is the first book in the Sinner of Saints companion series. So I do talk about this series very often on my channel. I kind of like stick it into like any video that can make it work, because I really am a huge fan of this series. It's one of the first dark romances that I ever read, and it has a very like soft spot in my heart. And in this book, this first one is a bully romance. So you're following these two people who originally met when they were seniors in high school. The girl moves on to this guy's estate because her parents are going to be like the new housekeepers for his property sort of thing, and he basically bullies her right off the bat. Like, he does not like her, but he has like a secret crush on her sort of thing. Like, everybody knows that he likes her besides for him sort of situation, and he is just so freaking mean to her, to the point that at the end of their senior year of high school, he runs her out of town and she never really comes back. So they were in California, and now 10 years later she's living in New York City, and that is when they bump into each other again while he is doing some business there, because he happens to own a company with like 4 of his best friends. Like, that's what the series is about. Each one of the friends get their own book, and basically they have a spot in New York City, they have a spot in California, in Chicago, and in London, and they're always trading places. Like, they obviously, like, one of them runs a spot, but then they're always like, you know, that for a couple of months at a time, they basically like swap, you know, buildings or whatever you want to call it. So it's his time to be in New York City, and that is when he bumps into her, and he realizes that he actually needs something from her. So he ends up hiring her. She ends up taking it because she really needs the money, and they're gonna obviously have a romance. He still like bullies her. He's still very arrogant. He's still very like vicious. His name is literally Baron Spencer, but everybody calls him Vicious, and it very much fits his name. But basically, at the end of this book, there is an amazing groveling moment. He basically does something wrong, and you know, she ends up quitting her job and getting a new job, and he has to beg for her back because he realizes that he needs her. And he basically decides like give up a portion of his company so that he literally can stay in New York for a time. Like, the guy that usually runs the New York office wanted to come back, and the only way to get him to stay where he was for a little bit was to give up some of his shares of the company. So he literally gives up like millions of dollars just so that he can stay closer to this girl for a little while to try and win her back. He has like 6 months to do it, and I'm pretty sure he uses like most of the time to do that. He ends up like, you know, one day he like sits outside of her building and like while it's raining, just so that he can hopefully like, you know, see her when she comes out of it. And the things that he does to try and get her back, all I'm gonna say is that it was an amazing groveling moment. It was so freaking good. It was actually the reasoning as to why I'm now obsessed with groveling. I'm pretty sure this was the first book that I ever read that had that like really good groveling moment that made me just want to find more books with it. And the last book that I'm going to share with you is Twisted Love by Anna Hong. So full disclosure, I actually didn't really love this book. The best part of this book for me was the ending when this guy had to grovel for the girl back. So, I mean, I didn't like it mostly because it was a little bit intense for me. Like the romance and then the background story didn't like fit so well with me. And I didn't absolutely love it, but it was still a pretty solid time. And I know that people are absolutely obsessed with this series. So I kind of wanted to put it into this video, mostly because because, it had an amazing groveling moment that kind of like somewhat saved the book for me. Like, I'm happy I didn't DNF it because I got to get to the end when the guy had to grovel for this girl back. So it's kind of a brother's best friend situation, but there's also like lies and deception going on in this book. I don't really want to give too much away, but basically the guy is, her brother's best friend, and they end up living next door to each other for a while the best friend is taking care of her brother's place while he's gone for whatever reason. And obviously they're going to end up having a romance, and then he lies to her. She finds out what it is that he was lying about, and then obviously she runs away from him, and then he has to work so freaking hard to get her back. He literally, like, I'm pretty sure in this book, like, he walked her home every single day for like months at a time, and like, she wouldn't talk to him, and he just would keep on being right in front of her to give her the chance, like give him a chance sort of situation. And I just remember that he worked really, really hard to get her back, and I feel like at the end of when she finally gave in, he did deserve it, because you know what, he worked hard for it. So if you like groveling and you're down to try this book out, try it out. I didn't absolutely love it, but the groveling did, it was a good time. So anyway, with that said, that is all of the books that I have to share with you for this video. I hope that you found some good recs in here, and if you enjoyed watching it, then please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel if you're not currently subscribed, and thank you so much for watching my video, for clicking on it. I very much appreciate it, and until next time, enjoy reading.